page 81 is where we're going to start. Well, let's get into this. Yesterday we saw the beginning of the conflict between these colonists and their own government, the British government. Remember, the Parliament was thinking that the colonists had too much freedom, and they started passing crazy laws. Right as soon as the French and Indian War ended in the year 1763, we're all proud of our accomplishment. Our militiamen fought alongside the British Army. We defeated the French and Indians, and we won that land west of the Appalachian Mountains. And no sooner did the war end when Parliament passed the proclamation of 1763. It said we couldn't move west of the mountains. Doesn't even make sense. All right, and then it wasn't long until they left soldiers here. They said to protect us, but we knew it was to keep an eye on us, enforce these crazy laws, and then they forced us to give them living quarters with the Quartering Act, 1765. And they followed that up with the Stamp Act, which was a tax. And our issue was not the amount of the tax. Our issue was the whole principle of the thing. We shouldn't be getting taxed by Parliament because we don't have a representative in Parliament. No taxation without representation. It's just not fair in any way. We didn't have any say in this law, so we shouldn't have to pay. That was our feeling. That's legitimate. Well, we said yesterday when it ended, finally, of course, they repealed the Stamp Act, and as good news as that was, they repealed it because of our boycotts. The boycotts worked, and as good as news as that was, we already said the trouble was far from over, and we see the subheading on page 81 says the breach widens. All right, it's going to get worse. So today we're going to see it's going to get worse. First event you'll see up here is the Townshend Acts, 1767. Townshend, by the way, is the name of the Prime Minister of Parliament. Acts, what is an act?
A law.
A law. And you'll see this time it's plural, so there's more than one in the Townshend Acts. And just like the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts is a series of taxes. This time, instead of a tax on a stamp, this time it's a tax on different things that you would buy. Things like lead, paper, tea, glass, things that in those days colonists would have bought regularly. Now they have to pay a tax called the Townshend Acts. Tax on all these different things. Well, here we go again, right? Did they have any say in this tax?
No.
No. So no taxation without representation. What do you think the colonists were going to do to all those items that were taxed?
Not buy them.
Not buy them. What's that called?
The lightning warning system has signaled an alarm. Please suspend all outdoor activity at this time.
Well, we were going to have
Please
class after
suspend
this, but
all
now I guess we'll stay in.
outdoor activity at this time. Thank you.
That's the most useless warning. They do it every time. Like anybody was really going to take their class outside.
Boycott.
So again, they're going to boycott all those items. Lead, paper, glass, tea. They're not going to buy it. Because of the principle, no taxation without representation. They didn't have any say. All right, well, years go by. We finally get up to 1770. Right, so the war has now been over for 7 years. And there's still British soldiers in the streets, especially in Boston. Most of what we talk about now will take place in Boston. Still soldiers, the war's been over 7 years, and they're still supposedly keeping us safe from the Indians, right? Yeah, right, we know better. It's not what it's about. They're trying to take away our freedoms. And over all these years, the resentment has been building up inside the colonists. They do not appreciate these British soldiers patrolling their streets every single day. And remember, we the colonists have to give them living quarters at our own expense. We're tired of it. We know there's some things we would like to say to these soldiers, but we don't. We keep it bottled up inside. By the way, that's always dangerous, to keep your feelings, your emotions bottled up inside. When you have emotions, that's the way God created us. We all have feelings. Right? We gotta talk it out. Gotta talk to somebody we trust. Tell them what we're feeling inside, because bottled up emotions, they're gonna come out sooner or later, and sometimes in not good ways. Well, the colonists never told the soldiers how they felt, although they resented them. And think how the soldiers feel. Do you think the soldiers liked being on colonial guard duty? No, they wish they could go home to England. As they see it, these colonists, they need to be here babysitting them because they won't pay their taxes and stuff. So the soldiers, they resent the colonists, but they never say anything. Do you think the colonists and the soldiers, every day when they pass each other on the street, do you think they're saying good morning, have a nice day to each other?
Mm-mm.
No, they ignore each other. They don't say, because both sides are filled with resentment. It's getting bottled up, day after day, year after year. The resentment's just getting worse and worse until finally it's March 1770, March in Boston. Now, March in Florida is a little different than March in Boston, right? In Florida, March, that is our busiest month. The population of Fort Myers is at its highest. All of New England and Minnesota and Iowa are down here in Fort Myers to see the Red Sox and the Twins in spring training, right? All the spring breakers are at Fort Myers Beach. And our weather's usually pretty good. We're famous for our March weather. That's what makes Florida so popular. We're not so famous for our September weather. But March is different. We got great weather in March. But this is Boston. March in Boston is different. It's still late winter. Why do you think the Red Sox come to Fort Myers to practice? Because they can't practice baseball in Boston in March. There could still be snow on the ground. So let's talk about snow for a minute. Raise your hand if you have ever seen snow. Most of you have. Right? And I'm pretty sure you didn't see it in Florida. Alright, so that means you've been traveling out of Florida. And depending on how much snow you've seen, you might have figured out. See, I grew up in Pennsylvania. Not all snow is the same. When it's really cold, the snowflakes are small, real tiny, and it's kind of dry and powdery, which is great for skiing. Makes perfect skiing snow, or sledding if you don't live near a ski slope. But it's terrible for making a snowman. That dry, powdery snow just won't pack. You can try to make a snowball and it'll just fall apart. All right, but when it's a little bit warmer, now obviously it's still cold enough to snow, but a little warmer and the snow is wet, it comes down, it can be really big flakes. And since the temperature's a little warmer, the snow might melt a little bit. Now it's still snow, but it's wet, which means it's not so good for skiing or sledding, but it's great for building snowmen. Snow just packs together and stays together in a ball, and then you can roll that ball in the grass, and the snow sticks to it, and the ball just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and the only thing limiting how big of a snowball you can make is when it gets too heavy, you can't push it anymore. Alright, and then you make another snowball and lift it on top, and the only thing limiting how big you can make a snowman is how big of a snowball you can actually lift. Perfect. Packing snow is wet snow. See, growing up in Pennsylvania, we did not have hurricane days like you guys have. Right? Hurricane days are kind of nice, right? Because you get off school and you always know ahead of time. So it's not a real big surprise. And then the day off, you really don't get to do much because there's a big storm outside, or there's no power, and it's hot as can be, there's nothing to do outside. Maybe the streets are flooded. Well, we didn't do that when I was growing up. In Pennsylvania, we would have snow days, and snow days were awesome. First of all, you didn't see it coming, so it's an unexpected day off. You wake up one morning, look out your bedroom window, and it's snowing, and you start to get excited because if it snows enough, those school buses won't be able to run today, and we might have a day off of school. Call that a snow day. So you run downstairs, mom be making breakfast, you flip on the TV, and they're naming all the schools that are closed for the day. Finally, you hear your school's name listed. Unexpected day off. And the best part is, you get to go out and play in the snow. So, get all bundled up, go get my friends together, and depending on what kind of snow it is, if it's that dry, powdery snow, we decide to go sledding. Alright, my friend had a really steep backyard. We'd sled down his backyard. Had to be careful though. At the bottom of the yard, there was a picket fence. And if you laid really low on your sled, you'd sled right beneath it. That's fine, but if the snow was deeper or you put your head up too high, you smack your head on the fence. Sled would go underneath, but you'd be left behind.
Ouch.
With a concussion or something.
Ooh.
Alright, and then if the snow was wet, well, we were too old to make snowmen, that's for little kids. But wet snow is also perfect for making snowballs, having a snowball fight. So we'd get all the kids together, pick two teams, two armies, right? We'd divide up teams, and then we would spend like 2 hours getting prepared for the war. We would spend more time preparing than the actual battle took place. First, we'd build forts. With this packing snow, you could make bricks, snow bricks, and build yourself a fort like chest high for your army. All right, and then when we're done with that, then you start stockpiling the ammunition, making snowballs and stacking them up in those pyramids like they do cannonballs. Put some of those stacks in your fort, and then we go around the neighborhood into the battlefield, and around the corner of a house or behind a shrub, we'd stash some snowballs, because you never know where the battle might take you, and you might need some ammo in the middle of a battle, right? You know where it would be stashed. We prepare like crazy.
Awesome.
Then we're all ready, and we declare war, right? And we'd have our big battle. Lots of fun, smacking each other with snowballs, running around the neighborhood. Sometimes we'd resort to hand-to-hand combat and be like wrestling in the snow, pushing people's faces in the snow, or getting your face pushed in the snow. Not so much fun. But anyway, it's all good, right? Now let's get back to Boston. March 5th, 1770. It's late winter, early spring. So the temperatures are higher, so it's wet snow. It's wet snow. And to get our story started, the trouble all starts with some 8th grade boys. That's not surprising. 8th grade boys can stir up a lot of trouble. Alright, these guys are on their way home from school. There's some wet snow, they're having their little snowball fight on the way home from school. Having good fun. They finally get to a street corner, they look across that street corner, and there is Dum Dum, one of these British soldiers with his stupid red coat, that stupid look on his face, patrolling that same corner that he's been patrolling for years, walking back and forth. He's bored to death, can't wait till his shift is over, wishes he could be back in England instead of babysitting colonists. He hates this job. Back and forth he's patrolling. Just another boring day. Nobody ever says hello or greets him. And And the boys come up with a plan. Hey, throw a snowball at that soldier. No, we'll get in big trouble for that. No, I don't mean we'll hit him. We'll just see how close we can get without hitting him. What could possibly go wrong with that plan? Uh-oh. Alright, so they agree that we won't hit him, we'll just see how close we can get. They all make a snowball. And then it's, alright, you go first. No, you go first. Alright, we'll all go at the same time. On three. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. They all chuck their snowball across the street at the same time. So here's the British soldier marching along as usual. All of a sudden, slap, snowball hits the brick wall next to him. What was that? Another one hits the sidewalk. What's going on here? Next one slaps him upside the head. Hits him in the ear. Snow packed in his ear. He doesn't know what's going on. He thinks he's under some kind of an attack, right? So he gets out his little whistle for an alarm, starts blowing on his whistle, calling for backup, since he's under attack, right? So the other British soldiers down the street, around the corner, from every direction, they hear the alarm, they come a-running. Alright? They're gonna see what's going on. Now the boys, they just run away giggling, arguing about whose snowball was that hit him in the ear. That was mine. That was mine. They just laugh and they have no idea the trouble they just started. So now you can picture this, right? Pretty soon, there's a small group of British soldiers gathered around this guy, saying, "What's wrong? Why'd you blow on the alarm?" "Well, some kind of an attack. It's my ear. Is my ear still attached?" Like, calm down, dude. It was a snowball. Yeah, well, it hurt. Whatever, right? So now there's a group of these soldiers, and they're talking to each other. And this makes all the colonists, the adults, they're curious, right? So in their homes or their places of work, their little shops or stores, they start opening their doors, poke their head out. They see a crowd of British soldiers. That's not usual. So they grab their coats, gonna go see what's going on. So now there's a growing group of colonists along with the group of soldiers, and they're saying, "Hey, what's wrong?" Somebody threw some snowballs or something, we're not quite sure what happened. And now the talking has started. And now all that resentment we've been talking about, they're gonna let it out. Some of the colonists are thinking, "Okay, soldiers, I'm gonna tell you what I really think." They say, "I got an idea, soldiers. Why don't you go back to England where you belong? We don't need you here. We don't want you here. We're sick and tired of giving you a place to live, seeing you walk around our streets. You're not here to protect us. You're trying to take away our freedom. Go back to England." And then the soldiers, remember, they've been bottling up their feelings too. They got something to say too. They're saying to the colonists, "Oh yeah? Well, I'll tell you what, how about you quit your whining and pay your taxes? We wouldn't have to be here babysitting you colonists. Then we could go home if you just quit whining." "Oh yeah?" And now the trash talking really starts. Back and forth, back and forth. Now by this time, there's a pretty large crowd of colonists. Can't you just picture it? We got a large crowd of angry colonists yelling at a small group of British soldiers. That's not that hard for us to picture. Just watch your news every night. That's exactly what's happening in some American city every night, right? There's a bunch of protesters / rioters yelling at police officers, telling them what they really think, right? And that's what's going on in Boston on the evening of March 5th, 1770. And they're getting more and more angry. The more they talk, the the more angry they get. And pretty soon, some of those colonists are holding sticks or clubs. And the soldiers are getting a little nervous because they're far outnumbered and the crowd is angry. So the soldier's like, all right, everybody calm down. Go back to your homes. There's nothing to see here. It's all under control. Yeah, well, this is mob mentality now. They're not going home. They keep yelling. They keep advancing on these soldiers. The soldiers are backing up till they have nowhere else to retreat to. Their backs are against the wall. And now there's objects flying in their direction. Some bottles, some bricks. Again, not that hard for us to picture, is it? Pretty much what we see in the crazy year 2020 every night all summer. All right, that's what's happening in Boston this night. What happens next? Not exactly quite sure. All we know for sure is one of the soldiers must have felt threatened or panicked or his finger twitched or something, but he fired a shot into the crowd of colonists. And when he fired a shot, the other soldiers figured he must know something I don't. So a whole bunch of soldiers opened fire on the crowd of colonists. Now suddenly, all the yelling stops. It is absolutely quiet. Everybody's standing around, their jaws hanging open. What just happened? Nobody can hear anything because their ears are ringing from the gunshots. All you can see is the smoke slowly dissipating in the breeze from the gunfire, and everybody's stunned. What just happened? Well, what happened is some British soldiers just fired upon unarmed civilian colonists. There's 11 of them laying in the street with extra holes in them. The blood is puddling in the street. 5 of them are dead, 6 of them are wounded. We call this in history the Boston Massacre, March 5th, 1770. Now I gotta teach you something else so you can understand this title called the Boston Massacre. See, when the people nowadays, when they report the news to us, they're not just reporting the news. I don't know if you know this or not. But wherever you look at news, whether it's on a website or on television, news channels, whatever, the people bringing you the news are not just trying to inform you of what happened. They're trying to get you to feel something, to feel an emotion, to inflame your emotions. The reason they do that is they're trying to get viewers on their channels, they're trying to get clicks on their websites, and just telling you what happened probably won't do that. That's their job, is just to inform us on what's going on. But they don't just do their job. They use words, just read their headlines, listen to their reports. They report the news in such a way to inflame your emotions, to make you feel something, angry at someone. Don't believe it? Watch the news, that's what they do. Now, a little bit of advice. Don't believe everything you read or see on the news. Understand they're not just informing you. They're trying to inflame your emotions so they can get viewers and clicks. More important advice. Do not, in your life, make decisions on your feelings or your emotions or how you feel. There's a word for that. That's called a fool. Now, God created us with emotions. We have all kinds of emotions. We can feel love or anger or frustration or whatever. There's all kinds of emotions, and that's fine. God made us that way so we can feel empathy for other people and things. But He didn't give us emotions in order to make decisions with. He gave us a brain for making decisions. right? You look at the facts, you analyze it, you use logic, you compare it to what you know is right and wrong, and then you make a good informed decision with your brain, not with your feelings. Don't ever forget that. But anyway, back to our story. This is known in history again as the Boston Massacre. See, massacre is one of those words that's not intended to inform you of what happened that night. It's intending to inflame your emotions and make you angry. Who called it the Boston Massacre? The colonists. Because they wanted all the other colonists to get angry at the British soldiers and the British government. And it worked. All right, can you imagine as the news spread? It didn't spread on Twitter, right? It spread by word of mouth. And you've experienced this. When someone who witnesses something tells somebody who wasn't there, they'll probably give a pretty decent account of what happened. Right? So it might go like this. Hey, I was down around the corner tonight, so if you're telling somebody else in Boston about the Boston Massacre, and these British soldiers, they were backed up against the wall, and everybody was angry, and they were defending themselves, so they fired into the crowd, killed 5 colonists. Pretty accurate what happened, right? Mm-hmm. But as the word spreads, now somebody who wasn't there is telling somebody else's story, and it gets twisted and exaggerated, right? That's how it happened. So if you live farther away in Massachusetts from Boston, you might hear the story like this. Did you hear what happened in Boston? British soldiers shot and killed a bunch of unarmed colonists. True, but not a real good description of what happened. Can you imagine if you lived in a faraway colony? By the time the story got to you, it would have sounded something like this. Did you hear what's going on up in Boston? British soldiers marching up and down the streets just shooting colonists for no reason. Not exactly, right? But that's what a lot of colonists were thinking, because it was called the Boston Massacre. And see, a massacre means people are getting killed for no good reason, just out of cruelty and hatred. Well, that's what we call it in history, but that's not a good term to describe what happened. So, in the aftermath, those soldiers were arrested. They were charged with murder and put on trial. And if they are found guilty, they will be hung. And guess who the jury is going to be? A bunch of colonists that live in Boston. Think those soldiers are going to get a fair trial?
Nope.
What do you think the jury is going to say? Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Yeah, I would think so too. I suggest those soldiers get a good lawyer. Well, their lawyer was a colonist from Boston. How about you've heard of this guy? Their lawyer's name was John Adams. He's one of our great founding fathers. He's going to be the first vice president, the second president later on when the United States starts. He was there and signed the Declaration of Independence. And to give you a little background on John Adams, he hated the British government, despised them, thought they were tyrants. And he resented those British soldiers being in Boston. And now he is those soldiers' lawyer. Doesn't look good for them, does it? However, as much as John Adams despises and hates the British government, he loves justice even more. See, justice means fairness, and justice means guilty people should get punished. They should never get away with their crimes. But justice also means that people who aren't guilty should not get punished. That's not fair. And again, John Adams loved justice more than he hated the British government. So he defended those lawyers. He got to the facts and he presented them to the jury, and he convinced the jury that these soldiers are not guilty of murder. They did kill those 5 unarmed colonists, but it wasn't murder. They acted in self-defense. They couldn't retreat any farther. There was no getting away from the situation. Were those soldiers in danger?
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of those colonists had clubs, they were angry, they were advancing on the soldiers, they were throwing bricks and bottles. Yeah, those British soldiers could have been hurt or killed. So their actions, although tragic, they weren't guilty of a crime. So the Boston Massacre is a tragedy, but it wasn't murder. And the jury, again, a bunch of colonists in Massachusetts, they came back with the verdict, not guilty. So the soldiers were not hung. They had a good lawyer. It was the right verdict. But the tragedies happen, right? Still 5 people dead, 6 others wounded. Yeah, the fact is, British soldiers did shoot and kill unarmed colonists. Wasn't murder, but it is tragic. Well, after that, everybody kind of took a deep breath and things settled down for a while. But that doesn't mean the resentment went away. There's still soldiers in Boston. They still resent being here. The colonists still resent them being here. And time goes on. And eventually, because of the boycotts, those Townsend Acts, remember those taxes on glass, lead, paper, and tea? The Parliament repeals the Townsend Acts, gets rid of them, except for the tax on one product. They left the tax on what?
Tea.
Tea. They kept the tax on tea. Here, I'll explain why. Look up here. This is why they left the tax on tea. Look at me. Now pay attention. Isn't that annoying when I shake my finger in your face? It's unnecessary, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm the authority in the room. I know that, you know that. I don't need to shake my finger in your face to prove that. That's unnecessary. Alright? Now, I know Maddox, he's a nice kid, but I could read his mind. He's thinking, Miss Kiefer, you best get that finger out of my face before I snap it off. I know he would never say that, but that's probably what he was thinking. And you know what? I don't blame him. Because I don't need to prove my authority by flaunting it in his face, right? Well, guess what? That's why when they repealed the Townsend Acts, they left the tax on tea. Now think about what tea meant to a colonist. That was their drink of choice. I don't know if you know this, but even in England today, they drink tea. They have tea parties and have tea times, and they drink their tea with their pinkies out, whatever, right? That's how they do it in England. And this was England, right? So most of these colonists were Englishmen, and they enjoyed tea. Kind of like coffee in America today. I gotta have my coffee every morning. I'm in a grumpy mood till I have my coffee. I go down there to by the high school office where they have a faculty coffee room, and I make my cup of coffee. And I can't wait till I get all the way back to my room before I take that first sip. Alright, so I gotta pull my mask down, take that first sip. Already feel better. Get caffeinated. Put me in a better mood. Man, you don't want me teaching class without my coffee. Alright, well guess what? The colonists love their tea. But they have now gone 6 years without tea because they're boycotting. And finally, the British government repeals the Townsend Acts, repeals all the taxes except on tea. You know why? Because this is what the British government was doing. They were shaking their finger in the colonist's face, so to speak, by saying, okay, we're gonna raise the taxes, or get rid of the taxes, except on tea. So every time you wanna drink a tea, don't you forget, we can tax you anytime we want. And to prove it, we're leaving the tax on the tea. Just to flaunt their authority. And just like that annoys you when I do that, guess what? That annoyed the colonists. Which leads us to our next event in December of 1973. It's wintertime in Boston, December 1973. Our story starts with a businessman over in England. A man that sells tea. That's how he makes his living. Is there anything wrong with selling tea in England? No. That's how he makes his money, he's just a businessman. But this, for reasons we don't need to get into, this businessman ended up with a surplus of tea. He has excess tea, more tea than he could sell. So the British government said, Mr. Businessman, I have an idea. Why don't you send shiploads of that tea over to the colonies and sell it at a reduced price, really, really low price, and that'll be good for everybody. It'll be good for you, Mr. Businessman, because getting a little money for your tea is better than getting nothing. It'll be good for the British government, because if he sells that tea, they get some tax, right? So they'll be happy, and they figured the colonists will be happy, because the tea will be so low price, they'll be getting a bargain. And even with the tax, the price will still be lower than they normally would pay for tea. So everybody will be happy. It's a win-win-win. Again, businessman gets some money for his tea, the government gets some tax money, because they left the tax on the tea, and the colonists get really inexpensive tea. So the businessman agrees, he sends his ships over. What the British government still doesn't get is when it comes to these taxes, it's not the amount. Were we looking for a bargain on tea?
No.
No, it's not about the price, it's about the principle. No taxation without representation. We didn't have a say, so we're not gonna pay, we don't care how cheap the tea is. We're not paying that tax. Well, here's how it went down. The ship filled with tea that came to the Charleston harbor, the colonists there didn't even let it dock. They said, turn your ship around and go back to England, we don't want your stinking tea. Don't care how cheap it is. The ship that came to Philadelphia, they handled it a little differently. The ship docked, the colonists helped them unload the crates of tea, put it on the dock, and then walked away, didn't buy it, and just sat there and rotted. Not gonna buy your tea. In Boston, they had an even different way of dealing with it. In Boston, where all this trouble's been going on, they're gonna deal with this kind of in a sarcastic way. You know what sarcasm means, right? They're gonna make a point. They said, all right, you want us to have some tea? You want us to have a tea party? Okay, we're gonna have us a little tea party. See, even the name, the Boston Tea Party, is sarcastic. What happened one night after dark, December 1773, a bunch of the colonists dressed up, disguised themselves like Indians. Middle of the night, got on board the ship full of tea, docked in the Boston harbor. They cracked open every single chest of tea, all 340 crates of tea, threw it overboard into the Boston harbor. Now time out, you know what that means, it's December, it's winter in Boston. So that night, that made the Boston harbor the biggest glass of iced tea in history. That's just stupid, never mind. Let's get back to the story. Alright, so they destroyed all the tea. The next morning, the British soldiers, the authorities, they see what happened. They see all those crates of tea floating in the Boston harbor, and a crime has been committed, right? That's vandalism. They need to get to the bottom of this. They're gonna start seeing if they can find some witnesses. So they get out their little notebooks, and they say, you sir, look here. What did you see last night? Mr. Peter, did you see anything? And he's gonna say with a grin on his face, I didn't see anything. He was probably one of the guys dressed up like Indians, wasn't he? Hey, by the way, why do you suppose they dressed up like Indians? Why didn't they dress up like pirates, or zombies, or Disney princesses, or whatever? Why did they choose to dress up like Indians? Anybody figure that out?
Because in that area, that's where they're at war with.
They weren't at war with Indians.
Oh, they like tea?
Hint. The whole, even the name, the Boston Tea Party, is sarcastic. Dressing up like Indians was part of their sarcasm. What are you thinking? Why did they do that?
Because they might have thought the Indians did it.
Yeah, well, it's not trying to just shift the blame. That's a good guess. Let me give you a hint. Who are the soldiers supposedly keeping them safe from?
The Indians?
Indians. Are there any Indians in Boston?
No.
No. So that's what the colonists know. You're not here keeping us safe, you're here being a tyrant. So they decided to dress up like Indians. So then they keep interviewing witnesses. How about you, ma'am? Did you see anything that happened? Did you see what happened? And she'll say, no, I didn't see anything, with a grin on her face, because everybody in Boston knows who did it, right? But nobody wants to rat them out. So finally, I'll get to this gentleman over here. Sir, did you see what happened? And Maddox will go, yep, I saw it all.
What?
I saw everything. All right, finally, somebody to talk. What'd you see, sir? Tell me who did it. He goes, well, I saw it all. It was a bunch of Indians. He'll say with a grin on his face. Is it Indians? Can't you see the British soldier? Indians? What do you mean Indians? There's no Indians in Boston. What can Maddox say now? Exactly. That's what we've been telling you for years. See the sarcasm? We don't need you to protect us from Indians. There are no Indians in Boston. Oh, but there were last night, weren't they? Where were you, soldiers? You're supposed to protect us from the Indians, but you didn't protect us last night. They stole all our tea. Oh no. You see the sarcasm?
Yeah.
The whole Boston Tea Party is just one big joke. It's kind of funny. I get it. I appreciate the name of it, Tea Party. I appreciate the dressing up like Indians. That's pretty funny. In fact, if I was alive in those days in Boston, I know my personality. I might have been involved in the Boston Tea Party, but in the end, did those colonists, did they hurt the British government in any way?
No.
Who'd they hurt?
Themselves?
Whose tea was it?
The guy, the merchant guy.
Yeah, the businessman. What did he do wrong? He didn't do anything wrong, but he had all his tea destroyed. That remind you of anything? How about these rioters that end up looting and stealing from businesses, or burning a Wendy's or a car dealership because they're protesting something? Did those business owners do anything wrong?
No.
No, it makes no sense, does it? So even though I get the sarcasm, it's kind of an interesting and funny part of American history. Really, those guys that participated in the Tea Party, it was just vandalism. Right, so they didn't really hurt the British government. And since none of you will cooperate and tell the British authorities what happened, really, and we can't find out who's responsible, you know what they decided to do? They're gonna punish all of you. They're gonna punish all of Boston. Is that fair? No, but that's what's gonna happen, and that's where we'll start tomorrow.